Welcome, Happy New Year to you.
Well, thank you. Very Scottish. Good New Year.
You're here, I saw you earlier having lunch with Roland Law and Neil Davis, your mechanics from the late 60s, early 70s. Slightly surreal.
Yes, there were two mechanics here yesterday, three mechanics from the Tyrrell team here yesterday because of the display we've got over there. And it's lovely to see them coming back. Roland Law used to be with John Coombs, and I drove the lightweight E-Type for John Coombs, and then he came to Tyrrell, and he did the Formula One team with myself and another mechanic who was here yesterday. And it was great for a reunion like that to take place at the AUTOSPORT Awards, the AUTOSPORT International, because they had so much to do with the cars that are displayed and so much to do with my life. The mechanics are, well, I tell everybody the mechanics are the only real professionals in motorsport. Drivers are a bunch of playboys. Team owners kind of fuddle around, but the mechanics are really focused. And I created the Grand Prix Mechanics Charitable Trust 25 years ago to help mechanics when in later life there might be hardship. And these guys that are here are in great shape. Roland Law's 88 years of age and still moving along quite well. So it's lovely to see them, you know, still keeping hold of an event such as this.
I'd pay good money to hear some of their stories.
No, I would pay for you not to hear those stories.
Yes. Mechanics, they have a really, especially in the modern game, they're doing 19, 20 races. They go all over the world. They're never at home. And it's really tough for them to have normal lives, isn't it?
Very difficult. To keep a marriage together just on its own, if you're doing 20 Grand Prix races a year and you're doing the early season testing and you're at the factory to God knows how many hours a day or a night or a week to get everything ready at the beginning. Now the rush is on. And all of the race mechanics are in, for example, day and night almost to get those cars ready for the pre-season testing. And then the cars get sent off to Australia and Malaysia, which are the first two races. So it's a very long year. And when it comes to after the Brazilian Grand Prix, I mean, they're shattered, they're exhausted. And I don't know how their wives put up with it. I know in my own life, Helen got fed up with it. Unfortunately, she still hung around. I mean, I've been stuck with Helen for 50 years we've been married now. I thought I might, but it's like sticky tape. You just can't get rid of you women sometimes. So, but really, it's they're the ones that are really going through the tough time, bringing up the children and so forth, while the fathers and the husbands are tripping around the world. It sounds very glamorous, but you know, you go to a hotel, you fly in a jet, you arrive at the hotel, you get driven to the, arrive at the airport, get driven to a hotel, you're then driven to the track, and that's all you see of Shanghai or Melbourne or Kuala Lumpur or any of the other places we go to. And really everybody thinks it's a jet set life, but for these guys it's a lot of work.
In your day there was more individual responsibility for mechanics on a particular car. Nowadays there's hundreds of them and everything's computer controlled and the safety is such that the pressure was on more for a mechanic or an engineer in your day.
The Ken Tyrrell early days, there were 7 people going to a Formula One race with 3 cars, because you were then allowed to have a spare car that went with you. And there were fewer flyaway races. But the hours that these guys worked, there would be all-nighters quite often. If there was a car damaged in practice or qualifying, they would work all night to get it ready. Now the regulation is that you're not allowed to work after a curfew time, and there's an FIA supervisor there to be sure that nobody touches the car from a certain hour to a certain hour, and that's all through the night. So you finish, I think, around 7:30 at night, and then you don't get back into the paddock area to work on the cars until 7 in the morning, I think it is. And of course the number of people, a Formula One team, the big teams, I know the Lotus team that take about 104, 105 people to every Grand Prix. The Ferraris and the McLarens will be about 110, 112 people to every Grand Prix, flyaway races or in Europe. Now, that's an awful lot of people, but there's only 47 engineers allowed to be there to try and keep costs down. In the past, they would have maybe 80, 90 engineers looking after these cars. In Ken Tyrrell's day, 3 cars, 7 people, including Ken Tyrrell and Nora, his wife, who made the sandwiches. Now we've got marketing, we've got PR, we've got hospitality, we've got kitchen people. We take our own kitchens, every single team, right from one side of the world to the other, to be sure that we've got the same high standards. But there's still only 47 engineers allowed to travel. So out of that 110 or 112 people, there's only 47 engineers. And they're now limited to the number of hours. So it's a much easier job today, in fact, for those mechanics, even though it's still, there's much more. I mean, I had only 11 races in a season, some seasons, Formula One, I mean. And now there are 19 or 20. So there's a lot of stress on the family.
Was it a shock to you 15 years ago when you started your own Grand Prix team and the logistics and the planning and everything involved in it?
It's certainly the most difficult thing I've ever done. I mean, the motor racing was a cakewalk for a driver. You get well looked after, you get all the benefits that you could imagine. You get very well paid for it. Paul Stewart Racing was a great success because when Paul wanted to go racing, I didn't want him to race, but he did. He wanted to do it. So we started up Paul Stewart Racing, and Andy Miller was here earlier today. He ran Paul Stewart Racing with us. And we had really good people, and we started that staircase of talent to bring along young drivers. Great collection. Alan McNish, David Coulthard, Montoya, Castro Neves, Gilles de Ferran, Peter Dumbrek, a huge number. Ralph Furman, still racing in Japan right now. And the engineers, it was a staircase of talent for mechanics, engineers, administrators, because we had 3 separate teams. Formula Vauxhall, Formula Euro Series, Formula 3 and then 3000. But there was nowhere to go after that. So not only for the drivers, but for the engineers and the mechanics. So we started Stewart Grand Prix. Logistically, it was a nightmare. The cost of it, our first year, I think, small money in comparison today, but it was huge money. I think it was 22 million we had to find in the first year to run the team. It went up to about 30 million by the time we sold it. But we never had an overdraft. We never had an equity partner. It made money, and we sold it well to Ford. But the stress, you know, we started off with about 170 people, went up to about 280 employees at Milton Keynes, same place as Red Bull are today. But they've expanded. They've got 620 people now in the factory. But to keep everybody going, to keep the right money in hand, and luckily with Johnny Herbert, who's here today, I'm sure many of you have seen today, he won the European Grand Prix. That was the German Grand Prix that year. So we won our race within 36 months. We finished second at the Monaco Grand Prix in only our 5th race. So we finished 4th in the World Championship in our last year, which the team was a terrific challenge, but very satisfying in the end.
When you look at the current teams, the McLarens, the Red Bulls and the Ferraris, what do you make of them? I think we'd all be fascinated to hear what someone like you, how do you rate the current crop of drivers and teams?
Oh, it's very professional. It's very well done. The equipment, you know, when you go, and some of you may have been able to go to a factory visit of a Formula One team. McLaren have got the most luxurious facility. Ferrari probably have the most complete total facility because they make the engines as well as the rest of the car, whereas obviously McLaren are having Mercedes engines. The amount of commitment financially, you're talking now a top team must be anywhere from 200 to 300 million a year with that number of people. Red Bull probably are the best package that's around right now. Christian Horner does a very good job. Without Adrian Newey, it just wouldn't be happening to that level. He's a genius, and he'll probably go down in the history of the sport as the greatest designer of racing cars. McLaren, best facility. I think it cost 350 million to build that facility, and it's beautiful. They haven't had enough success over the last 2 or 3 years, World Championship-wise, as they would expect. But they're well suited to do it. They've got all the kit to do with it. Ferrari, again, no shortage of money, no shortage of experience and knowledge, but they didn't deliver for Alonso last year a racing car that was good enough to be able to do the job. But they are the team in Formula One. If you think about it globally, they have the biggest support from the spectators in every racetrack we go to. But Lotus, for example, have come right up with Kimi, coming back from retirement. Much better return than Michael made. Third in the World Championship, pretty impressive. But you've got Mercedes-Benz now with Nico and with Lewis, so we're expecting to see that. And that should be a well-financed, well-packaged, with Ross Brawn and Nick Fry running it. All of these teams, Paul di Resta's here today, and that's now becoming more and more competitive, the Force India. Williams won a Grand Prix last year. They're showing competitiveness, and they've got a wonderful facility. So it's an enormous commitment financially to have, a 5-axis piece of machinery for engineering costs about £1 million per 5-axis machine tool. And you might need 10 of those. So you think about all of the other stuff, the 60% wind tunnel costs probably best part of £25 million to build such a wind tunnel. You think about that, then the simulators, then the computer simulation that they have. I don't think, that's why I sold the company. I didn't think that we at Stewart Grand Prix would ever afford the type of investment that was there from the well-established teams, and that was Williams, Ferrari, McLaren mainly at that time. So today it's definitely richer in respect to what it costs, and a great number. We are the capital for technology for the world of motorsport. Great Britain is where it happens. Everybody comes from all over the world to the UK for our knowledge and experience in the motorsports industry, employing more than 40,000 people annually. So that's why this show is so successful and so popular, because Britain is the home of top-line motorsport.
Indeed. One last question, Sir Jackie, because I know you're a busy man as ever. On the spot, slightly, how will Lewis Hamilton fare at Mercedes this year, and has he made the right decision?
If I had been Lewis, I would have stayed at McLaren, because I knew the team, I knew the culture, I knew the factory, I knew the team of people. And McLaren have more than 2,000 people working for them now with the new car and their electronics department. He went to Mercedes-Benz. I think Ross Brawn's a wonderful man. I think Daimler-Benz are one of the greatest companies in the history of motorsport, but they have to win. If they don't win, the Silver Arrow has to win, whether it was Stirling Moss and Fangio, whether it was Caracciola and the other great drivers in the 20s and 30s. When they were in the sport, they had to win. And if they don't win, they get out. That's the risk. If for whatever reason they do not win, it's a 5-minute board meeting decision with a bunch of people on the board that are not passionate about motorsport. They like the results if they win. If they don't win, it's yesterday. And that takes 5 minutes. So therefore, if you were looking at it in a conservative fashion, you would say, I better stick with McLaren, because I know they're always going to be racers. They will never be out of motor racing. So, but that's a personal thing. I mean, Lewis knows what he's doing. He's one of the fastest racing drivers in the world. When he's on, he's the quickest. But to do it consistently is not yet there.
Somehow I knew you'd have a good answer to that question. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Jackie has to go, so please, for the final time at Autosport International 2013, show your appreciation, Sir Jackie Stewart.